When you hear the words, I'm burned out, what comes to mind for that? Are there certain words or phrases or feelings that come up for you, whether you've said it or whether you have someone in your life who says, I'm burned out? What does that mean to you? Burnout isn't the enemy. It's really just feedback that tells us something isn't sustainable that we're doing. And when we are treating burnout as information, and not as part of our identity, that's when we can respond with curiosity instead of guilt or sort of other feelings. I'm saying this as someone who throughout my career honestly wore burnout like a badge of honor. I'd work those 90, 100-hour weeks, and it's something I might talk about when I was grabbing a drink with friends or something like that. And I think especially in a lot of the high-tech innovation, other sort of cultures that I've run in, that has been the norm. I myself have gone through a number of different types and variations of burnout throughout my career. And the worst experience was back in 2020. I was working with a company where we had been focusing for months on an IPO that they had. And they had a roadshow that was starting on a Monday. And we had been working on their investor deck for quite a long time and got feedback from the banking company about a number of changes that they needed to make. And unfortunately, a lot of my team that was working with me on that was not available over the weekend. There was only one person that was able to help me when we typically had a crew of 5 or 6 people that could help to bang this out. So I worked 40 hours over one weekend, and this woman, this designer, was helping me as well. And things just got to a boiling point where she had to, go to one of her, required activities she had planning to, and she had communicated that to me. And I was unkind in that moment due to stress. And for those of you who know me, kindness is my most important value. So the fact that I infringed upon that and did or said something that was not kind was a big wake-up call for me. And that really, sent me into a lot of soul searching, and was why I actually started Geode Lifeworks. Was I didn't want other people to ever have to experience that sense of shame and loss of identity and feeling not myself and just being overwhelmed. And so I've really focused a lot of my time on the research and details and other things you can do to not just work through burnout when it's happening, but prevent it altogether. And so the session I did today provided an opportunity to be developing skills and exploring things with the people who are really on the front lines of burnout, who are coaching and helping individuals and teams through this. I always like to dive in a bit to some of the details of what's happening in your brain during this time when you're burned out, because it really is about chemistry, not about your character. And so, if you think about your brain as a fist, or imagine this is your brain. In the very center, like you're holding a marble in the middle of your palm, that's your amygdala. And that is your fear center. That is where, when you sense danger, whether it's real or perceived, that is going to activate and flood your system with cortisol and adrenaline and sort of all those other, fight, flight, or freeze type of hormones. And so what's interesting is there have been a lot of studies done about what happens to the brain underneath chronic stress and things like burnout. And what we see is that, those who are in that state are going to get a much stronger stress response, even for little things. It's like your body's on high alert. Basically, your fear center is running hot. The other part that's really disconcerting for me is that it's not that just that the chronic stress is activating the amygdala. It's also impacting the prefrontal cortex, which is where we make decisions and where we're thinking about, impulse control and how we're handling focus. And what's disturbing for me is the research I've read about how during chronic stress and burnout, that part of your brain is actually shrinking. And we definitely don't want that to be happening. So, that's why we might, in times of stress, see some of the brain fog or the poor decisions or sort of the reactivity and other things that are happening. So when we talk about burnout prevention, we're not just talking about it in an abstract way. We also have to think about how it's affecting us physically. The other thing I like to explore with people is examining what stressors are having the greatest impact on them right now. And typically these stressors will fall into, 4 different groups. There might be more, but these are the 4 I talk about. It's sort of thinking about, well, what are the stressors that are related to change? What are the stressors related to conflict or overload? And then what are the stressors that might be related to communication? So what I'm noticing right now, especially in Silicon Valley and a lot of the folks I talk to at different events, is how much some of the new technologies, especially the AI race that's happening, how much that's contributing to change and uncertainty, and then stressors around sort of the work overload or communication or other things people face. Something that is on the surface meant to potentially give us more time or, increase productivity and sort of maybe help things to be less stressful. What I'm seeing is actually the opposite is happening. There's such a race and a push for adoption and use of these technologies without always having the support structures in place that will help people on that journey, on that change journey. It is causing a lot of overwhelm and challenges and contributing to burnout that we know on a global scale is already pretty pervasive across many, if not most, of our workforce. And then thinking a little bit about how and where, when those things are happening, how does that manifest for you personally? So are there certain physical things that are happening, or emotional or spiritual, or even the social and cognitive impacts that you yourself might feel? What is a way that we can capture that? One thing I like to do with, whether it's my coaching clients or family members or friends, is to do a little bit of a early warning map exercise. And so what you can do is draw a stick figure, or honestly, I often draw something that looks a little bit like a gingerbread person, or if you're an artist, go nuts with it, but draw sort of a full body. And then think about those different areas of stress and where they manifest. Are they building in your, what thoughts do you have? Or what emotions are coming to mind? Or are there certain manifestations in a physical way in your body that you want to, maybe you zero in and focus on? So you can go to your figure, whatever that looks like, and maybe draw or color or write down, what are those things that are coming up for you? And how do different areas of stress show up? So once you've done this, then take a step back and look at this and what patterns are you noticing, and where are there maybe some ways you can listen to those early warning signs of stress? For me, I will often get sort of a little bit of an eye twitch. I've been maybe on the computer a long time, maybe, not enough sleep, other stressors happening. That's an early warning sign for me, which will, trigger a need to maybe go for a walk or do a little rest or relaxation. That's one of my early warning signs. I think the other one for me is when I'm a little bit testy, a little bit snarky, a little aggravated or irritable. I tend to be a fairly happy person. I have a lot of optimism and practice that a lot. So family and friends and those who notice me being a little bit short, a little bit curt, a little, easily aggravated, that to me is a really great warning sign to say, hey, Skye, now's a moment where you need to slow down. Maybe you need to do a little more meditation. Maybe this is an opportunity to close the laptop for the day and maybe have a little rest and relaxation. Maybe meet up with some friends or go for a walk, play with the puppers. I just thought this would be a fun exercise, a little moment here to maybe jot down a couple of your early signals for burnout and what you might think about and go from there. So wishing you well and hope that this provides you some tools for next time.